There comes a moment in every man's inner journey when the story stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like destiny. When the heartbreak, the shadow work, the sleepless nights, the nervous system chaos, the abandonment wounds, the collapse of old identities, and the painful rebuilding suddenly rearrange themselves into one undeniable realization. He was never falling apart. He was being transformed, not punished, not abandoned by life, initiated. Because every ancient tradition understood something modern men often forget. Before a man becomes whole, something false inside him must die. The shamans called it the second birth. The mystics called it resurrection. The alchemists called it the creation of gold. Carl Jung called it individuation. But no matter the language, the process remains the same. A man descends into himself, confronts the unconscious, survives the underworld, and returns carrying a new identity forged through truth instead of fear. This is the final rite of the sovereign man, the coronation, the closing of the old chapter, the moment the king finally takes his throne within himself. Most men never reach this stage because most men spend their lives running from themselves. They distract, suppress, numb, perform. They build identities around survival instead of truth. They chase validation instead of asking why they feel empty without it. They seek relationships to escape loneliness instead of confronting the wounds creating it. But the man in this story chose a different path. He turned inward, into the memories he avoided, into the grief he buried, into the shame he carried silently for years, into the childhood wounds that shaped his nervous system long before he understood what fear was doing to him. He confronted the abandoned boy within himself, the boy who feared rejection, the boy who learned to overperform for love, the boy who became hypervigilant around emotional inconsistency, the boy who confused chaos with connection because chaos felt familiar. Most men protect that wounded child unconsciously for decades, but the sovereign man eventually returns to him directly. He listens, he feels, he grieves. He stops calling the child weak and starts giving him the safety he never received. And slowly, the internal war begins ending. This is the beginning of real transformation because a man cannot become whole while remaining divided against himself. Every ancient myth carries the same symbolic battle. The hero must confront the dragon guarding the treasure. But psychologically, the dragon was never another person, never the ex, never the parents, never society. The dragon is unconscious fear, controlling identity from beneath awareness. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of intimacy, fear of not being enough, fear of standing alone, fear of being fully seen. The sovereign man eventually realizes his entire life was shaped by avoiding these fears unconsciously. He chased validation because he feared worthlessness. He tolerated chaos because he feared loneliness. He abandoned himself to maintain connection because he feared rejection more than self-betrayal. And this is why the journey becomes sacred. Eventually, he stops blaming the world and begins confronting himself honestly. He sees how old wounds shaped attraction, how childhood pain shaped relationships, how emotional survival patterns shaped identity. And once he sees clearly, he can no longer remain unconscious. This is the slaying of the dragon. Not destroying emotion, but ending unconsciousness. Not becoming cold, but becoming aware. Because true masculine strength is not emotional suppression, it is emotional integration. The sovereign man no longer fears his darkness, because he has walked through it consciously. This is why his presence changes. His calmness is no longer forced. His confidence is no longer compensation. His boundaries no longer come from resentment. Everything becomes cleaner, slower, more intentional. The old identity begins dissolving because the man no longer needs survival strategies that once protected him. And this is where psychological alchemy begins. The ancient alchemists believed ordinary metal could become gold through fire, pressure, and purification. But the deeper meaning was always psychological. The true transformation was the ability to turn suffering into wisdom, fear into clarity, chaos into order, and pain into consciousness. The sovereign man becomes this process embodied. Every heartbreak purified him. Every trigger revealed unconscious wounds. Every sleepless night forced deeper honesty. Every emotional collapse stripped away false identities built around fear. At first, he thought life was breaking him. Later, he realized life was refining him. The fire was never there to destroy him. The fire was there to reveal what could survive the flames. This is why healing changes a man so deeply. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because the man becomes internally ordered. His nervous system stabilizes. His intuition sharpens. His discernment deepens. He no longer feels attracted to emotional chaos because his body finally remembers what peace feels like. The relationships that once consumed him now feel exhausting. The emotional games that once activated obsession now feel empty. He no longer mistakes anxiety for chemistry, inconsistency for passion, or trauma, bonding for destiny. This is one of the clearest signs. Individuation is becoming embodied. Attraction itself changes. The sovereign man now chooses relationships differently, not through fantasy, not through wounds seeking completion, but through alignment, stability, emotional safety, accountability, and presence. He no longer needs another person to rescue him from himself. And because of that, he can finally love without desperation. And perhaps the deepest transformation happens quietly. One day he realizes he's no longer fighting himself internally. The abandoned child no longer runs the kingdom. The shadow no longer sabotages unconsciously. The nervous system no longer reacts to every disturbance as if survival is at stake. There is space inside him now. Stillness, direction, authority. Not domination over others. Mastery over self. This is the emergence of the king archetype. Ancient traditions understood the king was never simply a ruler. The king represented inner order, consciousness stabilized, masculine energy fully integrated. A sovereign man does not lead through force. He leads through presence, emotional steadiness, disciplined awareness, and the ability to remain grounded under pressure. This is why people feel something different around integrated men immediately. Calmness without weakness. Strength without aggression. Confidence without performance. Presence without needing constant attention. The crown no longer exists outside him. It exists within him. Jung understood individuation as the process of becoming fully oneself, and this is the final stage of that journey. The fragmented parts reunite. The unconscious becomes conscious. The false self dissolves. The authentic self emerges. This does not mean the man becomes perfect. He still feels grief, fear, uncertainty, desire, and vulnerability. But those emotions no longer control his identity. He experiences them without collapsing into them. That is emotional maturity. That is self-mastery. That is sovereignty. And now the direction of his life changes. He builds differently, loves differently, speaks differently, chooses differently. His standards rise naturally because self-respect has risen with them. He no longer negotiates with disrespect. He no longer abandons himself to avoid losing others. He no longer chases emotionally unavailable people, trying to heal childhood wounds through adult relationships. Instead, he moves with patience, clarity, discernment, and purpose. The energy once consumed by survival is now redirected toward creation, legacy, leadership, service, and vision. The warrior survived the underworld. The sovereign man returns carrying wisdom from it. And this is the final realization waiting at the end of the journey. The man was never searching for power. He was searching for himself. Every heartbreak, every collapse, every confrontation with darkness, every painful lesson, all of it was guiding him back toward the truth buried beneath fear and conditioning. The crown was never something he earned from the world. It was something uncovered within himself. The king was never coming. The king was always there beneath the wounds. So if you are walking through heartbreak, shadow work, nervous system healing, emotional rebuilding, isolation, identity collapse, or the painful silence that comes after losing the version of yourself you once believed you had to be, understand this clearly. You're not lost. You're being initiated. The old identity is dissolving because the sovereign self inside you can no longer survive inside patterns built from fear. Trust the silence. Trust the confrontation. Trust the fire. One day you will look back and realize life was never trying to destroy you. It was crowning you. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe. This channel is for men rebuilding themselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually through grounded masculinity, Jungian psychology, nervous system healing, shadow integration, emotional discipline, individuation, self-mastery, and sovereign living. And comment below, what part of your old identity had to die for the man you're becoming to emerge? Read the comments carefully, brother. You'll realize many men are walking through the same initiation beside you. Chop wood, carry water, and let's keep the fire burning.